Hello everyone. This is well, I'm not going to call this an update because although there will be some new stuff shown and some old stuff, this is not really an update. This is something I thought I'd feel a little more comfortable with showing some stuff to everybody by doing. Nobody's complaining saying that I just am bragging by showing what I'm buying and stuff like that. So I thought I would use these engines in rolling stock right here to represent some of my tricks of how to find an item that you may not think about and then realize later on it could have worked. Like, for people that want brass, $75 works great. Needs a bit of oil because I don't run it that much, but then you just patience and you can find stuff at a great deal. Or like I did here, I had bits and pieces from locomotives, and yes, I still need to do a bit of work. Unfortunately, the boiler shell was heavily weathered by previous owner, and I put a new cab roof on because the old one was melted. But it's just bits and pieces forming an SP Pacific instead of me trying to hunt one down, which is pretty much brass, so I have to find one of those IHC ones. So like a great example of oddball stuff to find. This is a logging SW1200. The dynamics, torpedo tubes, winterization hatch, all these detail bits on it. Plow on one end. There is another part that goes there. It fell off. I have to reglue it on. It's a dummy, but it's $15. Sometimes you get lucky at a show. Sometimes you just have to put things together. Also, for knocking certain brands and all that, like this locomotive here, yes, it's missing a number board. Yes, it is a model power. It's an all metal model power. But for $60, it's an all metal model power with DCC and sound and runs great. And it was sitting at my local hobby shop for over a year because nobody seemed to notice what this engine had, and I've run this. It's a great polar bike because of its weight, and it sounds great. Oh, then, also for when you're looking for engines, like I know a few people are looking for tunnel motors. Don't just think Southern Pacific. Like, yes, I know Canadian Northern never had them, but $15. A nicely detailed and painted up Athearn tunnel motor, $15. And like, where's an engine I could say like we're dealing with a vendor? Like that Kato there, $10. Look for things that seem out of place. That paint job, as you can see, was custom done and it's pretty bad. So you point out things. Don't make it look like you're being harsh and belittling the product you're trying to buy, or whatever that word is, making it seem like it's a piece of junk. That's a Kato locomotive. It runs like it's brand new. It needs a coat of paint, but the vendor was not negotiable, but his price didn't need it. He said $10 for it. I'm not going to argue. Or here's another example. Or let me first get the name. Gilbert, or Gilbert, however you pronounce it. It's an all metal little switcher. DC. Guy had it at a show, $2. Just like these all metal, I got two of them. 8-axle heavy duty flats, $2 a piece. The guy just wanted them gone. sometimes you just get lucky. Like, here's a nice wood sided and made of wood tool car or a work car. Freebie, because the guy that I knew wanted to get rid of it. And I mentioned I was interested. And also, just be patient. If there's an item you're after and it's too expensive, wait. I risked losing out on this Western Pacific Mikado because I believed for a used engine it was priced a little high. So I bit my tongue on it. I didn't argue with the store it was at, because this was a hobby store it was at. And I do believe at this store they do mark up their prices a little too much. And I was rewarded by going in and they had a sale on. And it was already marked down to $125 before the sale. So I got it for a little less, and it sounds and runs like it's brand new. It's original. It was a second-hand item, but the original owner took great care of this. But also, look into shows or going to shows for looking for an item for someone else as well. If you have a friend that, or if you're a member of a train club and one of the club members has an item you want, buy it. Buy an item that you find for a decent price if you know they want it, if they have something you want. Like here, a Broadway, Pennsylvania T1. Great runner, weighs a lot because it's all metal, great detail. I got it because I had something a club member wanted and he had this. So we did a trade. I am willing to trade items. There are some engines I'm not going to trade. Like, I'm not going to trade that. Or this one. Or the ones I make. Although I have made a very special designed engine for a friend. Something I've been working on for 3 years and finally found all the parts. But you just have to know what you're after. And also, I know people say model and error and everything. Well, don't be very specific about it. Like, yes, you're modeling and like maybe you're after something like this and this doesn't fit into your era. Well, I know this one would be harder because this is an all metal locomotive. Here we go. There you go. And it's hard to modify, but if you find a plastic one of these, don't be afraid to try to modify the hatches or windows and detail bits to make it blend in with your era if you can get it cheaper. Like, I was going to paint one of my FAs into the daylight and I found this. It's on the frame that it's on is a piece of junk. The motor is shot. But I now don't have to paint a shell to make us an SP Daylight FA. In the process, I got an F7B unit with it. It's a dummy, but I can power up Athens. And for people that are looking for passenger trains and you want a good train and you don't want to spend a lot possibly, I'm after Norfolk and Western coaches. I found this one, $10. Brand new, never been built. I built it up, and all you do to these Athens heavyweights, metal wheels, KD couplers, and for me, I keep them truck mounted. I know a lot of people would argue that, but I can pull my CN heavyweight train forward or backwards without derailments, without causing me grief, and they're all body mounted, so I don't mess with them. But also, like, for getting a deal, if there's a vendor at a show that has an item you're after and you know at the show he's not going to negotiate, well, if you see him a few shows later and he still has the same item, don't be afraid to mention, look, you've had this item for a while, are you willing to drop down a bit and try to get rid of it to clear your shelf space? Be polite about it, but also don't indicate that you're trying to like buy and sell. Like, I don't buy anything you see here and then try to sell it, because I know a few people that would pay me a lot more than I paid for that. Or I think I picked up a Proto Reading GP7 for $10 with DCC. I was already offered double what I paid for it, but I'm not in the market to buy and sell. I bought that to go with my Reading T1. So you find items, and sometimes you have to bite your tongue and maybe spend a little more. Other times you can get lucky, but sometimes you can just convert. Like a good example is that CN 260 in there. And this Southern 260 here. Same make, same model. With a little bit of work and some detail parts, it has become a completely different locomotive. And detail parts at some places are 50 cents a piece sometimes. So just keep an eye out, and eventually you can find bits and pieces to make locomotives. So you don't have to sacrifice quality to get stuff. People might badmouth, like I have a few friends that they don't want Athearn locomotives in their collection. Almost probably half or more of the locomotives on that shelf there are Athearns. I don't know why people want to badmouth them. Parts are easily available. I've got 4 hobby stores in my area I can go to get parts off the shelf if something breaks. They're cheaper to buy. I can buy a couple Athearns for the price of a Proto at some shows. I have found Athearn powered engines $10 and under. And yes, they might be missing a few handrails or a horn. Okay, you go spend a couple bucks to buy a horn. It becomes the engine it was for still a very good price. Like here, a good example of that is this 45. I finally put it all together. I made the handrails because it didn't have them. All the brass wire, and those were pain in the butt to bend into that shape, but I bent the wire. All the brass you see is wire I've bent, and yes, I still am learning a bit. I cut that little, or I bent that a little too long, but in total, in parts for this locomotive, I've spent maybe $5, and yes, I need to power it, but because I have spare parts from people that didn't need them, it's going to cost me nothing really to power that engine up. Maybe if a gear breaks, I might have to buy one of those. But like, I'm not trying to say, argue with vendors, oh, you should be charging this amount, you should be charging that amount. Sometimes you have to see it from their perspective. A vendor might have this locomotive, even though it's used, on their table for $300, but they might have had to buy it from somebody for $250, so they got to make some money. It's not fair that they get what they paid, but they're also buyers themselves, so they know that there is negotiation room. So if you're polite with them, most vendors would be happier to see an item leave their table than for it to sit. So don't be afraid to, or feel offended to talk to vendors and tell them to lower prices. I've flat out said to a few vendors, your prices are too high. To sell your items, you've got to lower your prices. But I did it politely and indicated I'd be willing to pay these prices if you put it on your item, and they will disappear off your table. And I end up getting an even better deal because the vendor respected my honesty. So I ended up getting a bit more out of the deal than I thought I would. So It can, but also some vendors out there, like I know one in particular that has quite a bit I'm after, but I've seen him buy things for $5-10 from one vendor. Next show it's on his table for $100 because he thinks, oh, I can charge that much and get it. And I've seen engines on his table for the past 2 years. His prices are too high, so the engine sits. And it sits there, and people come up and make an offer. He's still making money, but he wants his price, so it sits there. And then he charges taxes on top of that. So, before I ramble on, I just have one last little thing. Keep an eye out for bits and pieces. Like here. The last show I was at, I bought this and a Spectrum 4-axle tender with the plug system and all that in it. But yes, I don't have an engine this will work with right now. But this is a very good CN Vanderbilt tender. It's very nicely done. So if I find an engine that could be made into a very nice CN or a very nice model, I have a tender to go with it. Whether it goes into CN, Southern Pacific, Pennsylvania, Norfolk and Western, I have a tender. Sometimes collecting parts, very good idea to do. Yes, it ties up room to hold things. Like, as you can see, I had to clean off the layout to set up engines for this video. But it can work out in the long run. Like, I can put a bunch of that stuff in the shelves and put away, just I'm sort of lazy. I get a new project and I sort of forget with what I was working on. Like this one, I've got as far as putting the couplers on this. I took the old coupler system off that one, and then a new project came up and that one went sideways. Then this showed up. I re-glued the roof rack, the walkway on the top. I glued on some pieces there to make it look a little better. Something else popped up, so that took a siding. Well, and also, if I'm very good at fixing locomotives. Like a lot of these were dummies or had broken parts and stuff like that that I have rebuilt and tweaked. I'm not the best at wiring. I have a friend that helps me with, or I shouldn't say helps me, he does it because I suck at it, but I'll admit it. I'm not good at soldering, but I can tear apart and rebuild a locomotive. Not a Broadway. I'm not going to try to tamper with a $500 engine or $400 engine. But Athearn blue boxes, protos, inexpensive Catos like that I'll look into. But when it's not worthwhile to try to tear apart an engine like that, I'm not going to do it. But so if you have an engine that's not working well, go ahead and ask me questions about it, like what you can do or if this is normal. And I'll give an input if it's worth fixing, if it can be fixed, where the parts can be found, stuff like that. I'm willing to help. But I've already had one person, I don't know who this person is, I just know they messaged me, and they wanted to trade me because they knew I liked fixing locomotives, because I do find it fun, a broken Bachmann 484. Yes, I love 484s. Everybody knows that. I've mentioned it countless times. But this is the old one with the plastic gears and plastic axles, which are shredded. There's no parts for it, and Bachmann won't fix them. So he wanted to just trade it to me, and in return I give him a Spectrum J class, preferably 611. I'm not into getting ripped off, and I'm not into ripping anybody else off. But please be respectful. If you know you have a piece of junk, it probably was a little quieter there, but if you have a piece of junk like that, expect to be getting a piece that represents the same value as what you're offering. Like if I offered this up for trade, I'd anticipate an equal locomotive, another Broadway possibly another Mikado, but I'm not trading this one. But if I did put it up, I'd expect to be offered a locomotive with sound and one in perfect condition like this one. If I would put this one up for trade because it's not in perfect condition, I'd expect a DC locomotive that's needing work. I've rambled on for too long. If you need help with something, I'm willing to assist. If you have questions about anything here, I'm willing to answer, but be polite about it. Just like how I've chatted with a few people offering trade options, I'm polite about it. Yes, there's one person I'm a little pushy with at the moment, I could say, but they've been a little pushy with me for one of my items, so it's just a little bit of fun payback, and they're not taking it personally, and they know I'm not trying to be offensive by it. So, well, I'm gonna have to clean up because it is like near midnight or something, I don't know. I don't look at the clock, so thank you. Enjoy your day or the rest of the day or whatever.